Hello everybody, welcome to a new video in the Madison dress series, and in this video you will see the neck binding for the center back option seam, so without the zipper. And for the zipper, be sure to look for the link in the video description, and you see there how I treated the neckline and the ends of the zipper. But this video, this is going to be the finished result, a beautiful neckline binded with a piece of ponte knit, the same type of fabric as the rest of the dress. So we are aiming for this equal binding edge around the neckline, and of course also pre-knit finish for the inside of the dress. And I hope it's going to be very clear for you. If not, you'll be able to put your questions here in the video description, in the comments under the video, and then I'll be happy to help you further. So let's start sewing. I just want to mention I'm making now another Madison dress, and I decided to straighten the neckline. And with seam tape is one of those tapes from Flissalina, the T12 tape. This one I'm using is actually a tape of interfacing with a row of straight stitches in it. Sometimes if I don't have this, I'm also making my own. And for a little bit of reinforcement, I also added some clear elastic in my shoulders, that they are going to keep my shoulder seam from stretching out. You can find in the video description a small video I made on how I'm attaching the clear elastic on my shoulder seams on knit fabrics items of sewing projects. So this is what I did on this one, also on the back neckline. So I applied the seam tape on the wrong side of the fabric. For these two samples I did not apply any interfacing on my neckline, so we'll see how that goes. This is both samples are made with ponte knit, so it's a stable knit, and also the neck binding is from the same kind of fabric. Only you need to be careful that you cut your strip of fabric for the neck binding on the greatest stretch, because you have the neck binding is cut at 90% from the length of the neckline. So including and you have to add to that the seam allowance. On this one I have a 6mm seam allowance. So the next step, after you have your center back seam dealt with, either sewn or the zipper attached, the shoulder seams should be attached, and then you can start on your binding. The first step, it will be of course joining the neck binding in the round. Just a few things I would like to mention before I start sewing is that with this ponte, especially that it has no printed side, it's really difficult to say which one is the right side and the wrong side. So when I'm cutting, and I really can see that, I'm marking all my pieces that I know that they are all cut on the same with the same side. So I keep one side and I stick with that through the whole project, because you never know, you know, with the lighting and things like that. So also another thing I'm doing is that when I'm sewing with my normal sewing machine, I am putting the presser foot tension a little bit lower, so that the machine is not really stretching my fabric too much. And I'm sewing with a universal needle and normal thread. I'm going to use here white thread, then you can really see on all these colors I'm going to work with. So I'm using a white thread, but of course you'll use a coordinated thread with the colors of your fabric. So with that being said, I'm going to join my pieces, and I'm going to just make a straight stitch. And to be honest, I think I took here just a little bit more than 6mm, but it's okay because this is really very stretchy, and I know it's going to be enough to go around my neckline. The next step is going to be quartering our edges or our seams where we need to attach the binding. So the first one to quarter the neckline is going to be, we have the center back and we have the center front, and then if we put these two together, we will get the other two. There is not always by the that you could think very fast that the shoulder seam is your quarter, but it's not. So you really need to put those two together, the center back and the center front, and then you'll get these two edges or these 2 points where your neckline is actually divided in 4 equal pieces. And here you have the neck binding, and this needs to be the same. I have here the center back, and I'm going to put another pin here, and then if I'm going to meet these 2 points, I am going to get the other 2 equal parts. And from this is really easy. The next step is to apply the binding to the neckline, and I'm going to we are going to sew it to the right, on the right side of the garment, and then it's getting folded, and then you get the nice binding. The most important thing in this, as I mentioned earlier, is to keep in this step to keep your seam allowance really very accurate, those 6 millimeters, because the binding is going to fold over that seam allowance, and that is going to form the binding of the finished edge on the neckline of your dress. And of course is that if your seam allowance was not equal, then you'll have a very wonky neckline. And then now the next step is to align the center back and all these other marks we've made. And you'll see that the binding is just a little bit smaller than the actual neckline of the dress. But that's okay, because we want to avoid any gaping and things like that. So that is going to ease a little bit the neckline into the neck binding. Of course, you have to stretch only the binding. As you can see here, this is the dress and this is the binding. And if I'm going to, you can see that you really need to pull a little bit, and then everything is going to get aligned. Okay, so I'm going to get back to the machine, and I'm going to show you how this is done. This step is really easy. Actually, all the rest of the steps are really easy. I'm at the sewing machine. As I said, I'm going to stitch this with straight stitch, and what I want to do, the 6 millimeters on my machine is somewhere here, but then that means that my presser foot is not completely on my fabric. So what I like to do, as you see, and it's not fitting completely entirely on the dog feet. So what I want to do is to move the needle a little bit to the right, that I can pull that I can feed my fabric on the complete dog feet on the machine, and that is going to make it easier to sew with such a small seam allowance. And to do that, I just need to measure to see where my 6 millimeter should be from the edge to the left. So I'm going to move the needle from the center a little bit to the right, and I'm going to do that now. Let's see. A bit down, and I have from the edge of my presser foot, I have like exactly 6 millimeters. So I had to move it 3.3 points or steps, should I say, on my machine. And now I can align my fabric with my presser foot, and I know that it will fit really nice, even if my seam allowance is so small. And I can start sewing. I know that I need to pull on my binding because you can see the dress is much longer, or the neckline is much longer than my binding. As I said, I cut it with a 90% ratio, comparing with the neckline. You really need to take small steps. You don't need to sew it in one time, and then that will give you the chance to adjust the tension here on the neckband, and you know that you don't get here a lot of fabric or a lot of neck binding. You should really follow the curve of the neckline. A very important thing is to mention that when you are arriving at the center front, you should really keep your neckline completely straight, like so, and not make that V, because that V you are going to make it later when the complete neck binding is attached. So just follow with your neckline the straightness of the neck binding, like so, and just sew it straight, and then later you'll form that little V. This is our neckline as we sew it on the sewing machine. As you can see here, you can really see where I pulled the binding and where it get a little bit eased in. So with that in mind, you can imagine that this is going to fit very nice around your back neck without any gaping. I'm just going to do a little bit of a press as it is, and then I'm going to press this seam a little bit, trying to keep things flat and not making any pleats or other kind of ugly things here. The next step is going to be to turn this up and then to the back, up and to the back, like so. Then you have this beautiful edge here. Of course, you need to be careful to have here really nice and how should I say, a flat edge, and that your binding is really ironed up, and that you don't get those very small how should I say, you know, that is not actually really well pressed, and that's not looking really nice. So I'm ironing here directly on my fabric, but I think that if you have you really need to test your fabric and use pressing cloth otherwise, because you don't really want to have those shiny flecks on your shiny spots, should I say, on your binding or on your dress. This is a point of your dress. This is a point where it's going to be very visible. So of course you want to have it perfect, without any mistakes. And if you feel like you are a little bit unsure about the neck binding, you can always make a small mock-up, like I did here, a small sample, and try your hand on it. And of course that will make the real thing more enjoyable and without any stress. Here I have the center front. As you can see, that small V. Also this one is going to get, you can see it better, even better here. This is also going to be just folded to the inside, and then later we are going to make a small V here, a small seam that is going to give us the nice V in the front of the garment. So this is the binding at this moment. Of course you can start turning this to the inside, and the idea is that we are going to stitch this in the ditch. So put a pin exactly in the seam you just sewn, like you see here. Pull the fabric just a little bit like this, that you get really that that you get your pins exactly in the seam. I'm going to pin this around, and then I'm going to meet you at the sewing machine to show you how I'm doing that. So I'm now at the sewing machine. I pinned all my the complete neckline. I have it, as you can see here, the binding is wrapped to the back, and I have here, this is where my seam is going also to be, my row of stitches, and of course I'll have just a little bit extra that I can trim later if I want, but it's really not a problem because it's pointy and it's not going to unravel or something like that. So the next step is going to be to stitch in the ditch, so exactly where these pins are, where my previous seam is. So stitching in the ditch, and to do that I can use either my standard sewing standard presser foot from my sewing machine, and I have here, there are a few markings on the, let's see, there are a few markings that I can use as a guide, but I have also a stitch in the ditch presser foot. It has this flange here that is going to run exactly in that seam I just made, and that is going to make it even easier to sew exactly in this seam. So I'm going to use this presser foot, and let's see what we get. I also switched to a dark blue thread to give a little bit better the idea, the feeling that if you sew right, is this stitch row of stitches, it really must be invisible, because then this is how it's supposed to look, that you don't see any stitches, unless you want to have a row of top stitching or things like that. I think you should avoid starting exactly at the center back, because there is a little bit of bulk there, and the idea is to go slowly, find your seam, find the right place where you need to guide your flange, and then everything is going to be okay. You can even start by making a few turns with your hand, and let's see how it's going. I'm sewing in a little bit awkward position like this because I cannot really reach my knee lift, but that is something very, very useful. And try to push it a little bit against. Let's see what we get. There is really no need to hurry up here, because this is one of the most visible points on your garment, and of course you want to have it perfect. You can even baste this around, and that's going to make everything even easier. I'm going to completely sew this around, sew in the ditch the whole time, even on the center front. You need to keep this straight and to sew it in the ditch all the way around, and then I'm going to meet you back at the pressing table and with the finishing touch of making that V in the center front. So my binding is completely stitched in the ditch, as you can see. Let me see. I used a dark thread to coordinate better with my binding, because sometimes I have my risks are to get in the binding and not so much in the bodice when I'm sewing. So I made it with the dark blue thread, and as you can see, is really almost impossible to see. I think the stitch in the ditch foot did really help. And here in the back I still have the white thread in my bobbin, so you can see how the stitches are all the way around. Let me see, where are you? Where is the cam? Here. Okay, so this is completely stitched now. It's completely closed and done. You can really trim this. I used the binding is 1 inch width, so I think this is really is okay how it's looking like that. And before I go further, I would like to give this a small press, and sometimes it's helping if you use a little bit higher surface, that you are not pressing also other things that you don't want to press. And here we have that front that is willing to turn and not to stay flat. Here also a little bit of steam. And as you can see, because we started with a nice straight 6mm seam allowance over the whole thing when we made the first row of stitches, everything is looking now nice and even, as you can see. So this is pressed, everything is looking nice and flat. Maybe a little bit of press here. And the next step to finish our neckline is going to be to make that little V here, to have a nice V on our dress. So to do that, you'll have to, that's why I'm saying that it's easier to bind the neckline if you don't have the whole dress, because now you are working the flat and it's really much easier. You'll have to put right sides together, back matching everything you can match, like this armhole and the shoulder seams, of course, and to have it completely flat, like so. This the shoulder seams are aligned, this the princess seams and the armholes, and then you can put a pin here exactly at this point. Let me see. Like so, aligning these edges together and pin it to the center front. That is why you need to align the shoulder seams and all the other edges, that you'll get here the V exactly pointing with the point exactly on your center front. If you open this, of course this needs to be sewn. Just a small stitch here at the binding only, stopping exactly in the here at this point. So just a small stitch, a diagonal stitch here, and that is going to form that beautiful V that you'll have on your dress. I'm going to do that, and I'm going to meet you back to see the results. I'm the sewing machine to make this V, so I think the best way to orient yourself when you are making this, I always find it a little bit tricky when to sew that small piece. If you start at the edge of your binding, you should stop here at the stitches line from your binding, but you can really align and you know, use it as a guideline the center front of your garment, because then you are going to be completely straight when you open that V. So let's give it a try. I'm going to use this little thing to help everything fitting in one time. So let's give it a try. I'm going to take very easy my pin out, and for this, as you can see, is starting to put a little bit wrong, so I'm just going to stitch this and one more to the stitching line. Let me take a pic. Yes, and maybe just a tiny stitch. I'm going to turn the wheel with my hand. Let me see, I think I went just of back stitching. I'm just going to lift my presser foot with my needle in, and I'm going to turn my work, and I'm going to come one time more back, following the same row of stitches I just made. And as you can see here, my presser foot is not straight, so I'm going to put this thing under, and you can see it's now it's looking straight, and I'm going to very easy or very slowly I'm going to sew back. Put this back again. 10 more. Yeah. You really need to don't sew your fingers. I highly recommend that. Let's see. I think I can take one more and maybe one more. Yeah. And then for the last time, because I don't want to cut my threads exactly at the edge, I turned and made 2 stitches
so this
extra.
will have to be little press. Again, also here, use a pressing cloth if you don't want to have any and this is how our neckline is looking for the Madison dress. As you can see, I can see a few wrinkles here, but everything is very easy to be steamed, and then everything is nice in place. This is how the back is looking of the dress for my sample with the binding, and this is the front of the binding with a nice V here. And I think this is looking also okay. If you should use also for the bobbin a nice coordinating thread, you really not see anything. And this is how the back is looking with the small stitches here to make our V, and everything is looking nice and flat. I hope you find this tutorial useful. I am going to make also a tutorial for the exposed zip option of the Madison, and here there is going to be a little bit different, but the principle is the same, only we are going to finish these ends at the end and not as the first thing as we did in this case. I hope you enjoy it. Don't forget to like the video and to subscribe to my channel if you want to see new videos from me and new sewing tutorials, and I'll really love to hear from you what are your opinions about this tutorial and my channel in general. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!